folks. Today I want to talk about using feedback as a way of building skills and providing an opportunity to learn before the summative assessment. So each Wednesday I do a Write About It Wednesday. Writing practice is so important in the high school English classroom, and it's a skill that students are going to need both in and out of the classroom for the rest of their lives. So for me, I really focus on giving my students language to understand analysis and answering critical questions in informal ways to be able to build those skills, get some feedback, and master the writing skills that I'm looking for before the summative. So here is, for example, we just read an article called January, and it's talking about life and setting goals for the year. So asking my students to critically think about the articles that we've read, in addition to a TED Talk we've watched and additional conversations in class, I'm asking them to analyze 3 takeaways that will lead to a better 2026 for them. So being really explicit with grammar skills, making sure that my students are giving 3 takeaways, but not only are they listing or gathering evidence, but they're explaining how and why those takeaways support their lives. Again, using that language, the how and the why, to develop further analysis skills. Also, it's really important in 2026 that we are explicit when it is appropriate and when it is not appropriate to use AI. Since this is a formative assignment, I want my students to come up with ideas from their brain. Instead of brainstorming or using AI as a thought partner, I want them to think independently so that they can develop those skills, practice that analysis on their own so that they can master it later on in a summative. So again, be explicit with your AI use and how and when you want your students to use it. Now, with formative practice comes the power of feedback. So giving explicit feedback along the way for my students' writing skills is so important and helps them to build those skills for the summative assessments. So there are 2 ways that I like to give feedback in my classroom. One is utilizing my LMS, and I have built-in comments that I can add to my students to give them really explicit feedback. I also really love using the screencaster in my LMS or creating voice memos for my students. So as you're thinking about giving feedback to, here I've got 89 students to give feedback to, thinking about being efficient with my time, but also being really intentional with that feedback is key. Another one of my favorite tools is up here in my extension, Permanent Clipboard. Permanent Clipboard is a tool that I've used for years that allows me to build out some of those commonly asked questions. And so as I click here, you can see that I can add this to my feedback as well. I can embed links. I've developed really detailed feedback points and ideas that I share with my students, and I link it for them so that they have access to additional resources that we're using in the classroom. So find ways to give intentional feedback, specific feedback, and of course timely feedback. It's an important part of that formative practice and using assessment as a learning tool and not just an end of learning